So I want to talk a little bit about real world circumstances and to see how we can address the problems in the real world from the perspective of Amanasaka yoga and self-knowing, right? So I want to talk about my personal life and, a crisis that I went through some years ago. So this happened a few years ago. I was involved in a business venture with some partners, and in the beginning it was going quite well. But as about a year and a half into the venture, and I started to see some inconsistencies, some cracks, as it were, in the whole thing, and I tried to address it, although it didn't go anywhere. But I still stuck with that, obviously, because I wanted to succeed, I wanted to make money, so on. Basically, I was greedy, right? So I let it continue. It came to a point where the whole thing just burst into flames, the business venture, and I was actually sort of betrayed by my partners. So what happened at that time for me is the business going south, that was not so much of a concern. Although it was, I had built a big, what you may call a dream. But that wasn't a big problem. For me, the betrayal, the backstabbing was sort of a very, very unpleasant experience for me. And it really affected me at the time. And I didn't know how to reconcile this backstabbing, right? Can you throw some light on it? Like, what would people do? What can people do when they come to that point?
People probably do various kinds of things. They try to put the problem under the table. They try to forget it. But then there is always the residue of sorrow, the residue of disappointment and betrayal, and you're not able to get over that. So the self had a dream, and it's always good to have a dream in life, and one must have a dream in life. That's part of being human. And we need not insist that the dream has to be permanent, the dream has to be constant throughout life. No such thing. Dreams come and dreams go. Dreams may fructify, or dreams may perish, or may go just wither into the dust. Whatever, so many possibilities are there. So the dream must be there. That's part of being human. Now, when the dream goes up in flames, then the self, which is craving for the fulfillment of that dream, and which is the father and mother of that dream, which wants the dream to go forward, that self has got to face failure. And while the self goes after success, it is incompetent and does not have the intelligence to face failures and digest failures. That's what is wrong with the self. It runs behind success, but when a failure comes your way, you don't know how to digest it, and you don't even know how to deal with it. That's the problem of the life of the self. Now, when the dream goes up in flames, and what you expected, what you conceived, turned out to be a nightmare, vacuous nightmare, then obviously that whole momentum of the self, which is still there, even though it has no tally with reality, reality is to the contrary, but there is a living momentum in consciousness, and which is in the form of thought and feeling, and disappointment and betrayal and all of that. Now, that whole thing has to come to an end. Will you agree with me that momentum has to come to an end? Will you agree with me, Lakshmi Kumar?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Very good.
But it's not easy to bring it to an end.
Right.
That's what's.
I agree.
So yeah, like if you look at the first step, if I may call that as a first step, is that sudden reality hits you, right? Like you you come to understand that you have been betrayed or you've been, cheated, let's say. And why is it so difficult for us to reconcile? Why are we not able to just see it as it is? I always wondered
Yeah.
why. Why
Okay.
did we get hurt?
Beautiful question. Beautiful question. You got hurt, and there is a betrayal because you had a gargantuan aspiration. The self was greedy, and the self already built an empire of greed and wanting to be successful. And the dream was so beloved to the self. And it is self begotten, the dream, the aspiration. And therefore, the self, by definition, is the creator of the dream. And so when the dream is destroyed, that tantamounts to the destruction of the self itself. Because there is no self apart from the dream. The self is in the dream is in the self. So when the dream comes to an end in outer reality, but then that's not enough that the dream has come to naught in outer reality. There is still the momentum of the dream in consciousness, and worse than that, there is the momentum of betrayal, because the self had grandiose expectations. It wanted to become a Maharaja or something, whatever it is. That's not important. But it built that empire, not in outer reality, but in thought and feeling. It built that empire. And that empire is synonymous with the self. So now if you are to get over the betrayal and also the disappointment, then you have to see your own culpability in the whole debacle, your own culpability in the calamity. You got to see that there's a calamity which happened. And are you merely a victim in that calamity, or are you also a co-villain in that calamity? You've got to impartially observe the whole thing like an outsider, not as Lakshmi Kumar, but as an outsider. And if you're patient and willing to do that homework, which is contemplation and very silent inquiry, then you will find that you are an architect in that calamity. You are an architect of that dream. And but the dream was fated to go into the dust. And therefore, to hold somebody else as the villain and not to be conscious that you are also a villain in the whole thing, that will put you in a position of being unable to forgive the betrayal and unable to get over it.
So that is a perspective very difficult for at that moment.
At that
I'm
moment,
saying,
yeah. But you have to work on it. You've got to work on it.
Yeah.
You've got to bring it back and cognize your contribution of how you contributed. You are a co-architect in the whole misadventure.
After all, I did notice there are inconsistencies and things that were not right, but then I let it go because of my greed.
Greed
right?
and fear. Because
Right, yeah.
the fear will hold you back, and the fear will tell you that if you now want to poke a finger and become an advocate of truth, then you're not going to get the promised land, which is an empire.
Yes.
That's what the self wants. It wants an El Dorado. It wants. And it thinks it may get that El Dorado if you're now don't point a finger, and if you're silent, then in the morrow you may get that El Dorado. That's the self's game. Okay? So you could have aborted the whole dream at that point,
Yes.
if you were an advocate of the truth, but you chose not to because your greed convinced you that you should not abort the dream.
Yes.
So you had your hand in the whole thing as well. So now to realize that fully, that you are not as much betrayed as you went on a misadventure, and you're as much responsible for as your fellow partners in the venture. They're also responsible, no doubt, but they and you cannot be separated because you got into the boat together. And therefore, that was an ill-fated mission.
So why does this? So the self, in all its mischief, it also has this thing where it doesn't want to point at itself. It wants to point away.
Yeah.
Why?
Why? Because there's no teaching asking you to shift the attention and turn it around 180 degrees. So, and the external world appears real, and the inner world looks non-existent, and unimportant.
I see.
Because it's flimsy thought and flimsy feeling. And the outer thing is full of the tangible world, big buildings, big empires.
People.
So you're bamboozled by all that. And therefore, you have to spend quite some time. Now, the whole of this is meditation.
Right.
This is meditation. In Krishnamurti's worldview, this is meditation. And to know yourself, that your greed and your fear prevented you from getting a less severe beating. Because you could have aborted it, but you didn't. Both because of greed and because of fear. So you didn't. You were not the advocate of truth. You knew that manipulation was happening, but you allowed it to pass because you had a stake in it.
Right.
You had a future stake in it, and therefore you have to dwell on the new teaching, which you are giving yourself. Nobody is giving that to you. You are giving yourself that you are actually an architect. So whom are you going to blame? It's self-begotten. It is self-created. And so it's a lesson for the self. And so Krishnamurti says, ambition is poison. Now, do you find that illustrated in this particular episode, that ambition is poison?
Absolutely.
Okay. So one person asked me, who is taking the Manasika Yoga course, that he said, I understand everything that you're talking, but how to know that ambition is poison? He asked me. So he's a very bright boy. And then I said, this particular sutra alone of the master, that ambition is poison, you will know only after a fall, never before a fall. So you need to go through the experience of thinking that you're rising sky high. Then you will have the doomsday fall. Then after the fall, in hindsight, when you do your homework, when you see what all happened, then you will say, got it. Ambition is poison. And this is a hard lesson, and very few people learn these lessons. So one of the great advantages of the self-knowing is that you can get rare insights and lessons about life like this, so that such a very calamitous event will not be repeated in the future. Because now you've got a new vigilance about the mischief of the self. The self was mischievous. The self was self-centered. It was greedy. And here is the fruit. And so this is great that you're able to, in hindsight, pick up the sutra that ambition is poison. And okay, now I ask you one question. So after the aspiration and the hope loomed large on the horizon, beautiful, the sun of hope and the sun of aspiration was rising on the horizon, and it called you, it beckoned you. And Lakshmi Kumar voted for that and joined hands and went into the adventure. And then the whole thing went into the dust. So now, don't you think, I'm suggesting something which is not cognized in society, don't you think that the broken parts, it's like cutting the tail of a lizard, and you see that the tail is still writhing in pain, and the lizard is still writhing in pain. So now after the whole thing, the debacle has happened, now don't you think that the whole episode, the misadventure, everything, should be given a decent burial,
yes,
which I call dying to the experience, so that it's all ashes and not a thought and not a feeling from it is going to haunt you like a ghost. Don't you think you should do that work?
Is that possible?
It is, of course, possible. That's the whole essence of Krishnamurti's teaching.
Okay.
That's the whole essence. That is possible. But who will do that? You have to do it. And the course is for that. So that when you complete that whole episode and this is the last 30% or last 40%, when you die to the whole thing, and that experience came and it led you astray, and then the whole thing is buried and then it is gone, then you will find that there is forgiveness. When will there be forgiveness? When you have forgiven other villains in the piece. There are 3 or 2 other villains in the piece whom you are now holding responsible, but they are manifestations of your own greed, your own fear. They are not independent villains. And now when you digest that lesson fully and then agree to your culpability, not before a jury, not before a judge, but to yourself, meditative work, then I think you will be able to meet all the villains with a smiling face.
So in that sense, I don't want to sound all grandstanding here, but if this is how I have to learn a life lesson,
right?
In fact, these so-called villains, the people that did that to me, in fact, they seem to be like teachers from this, looking at it from this perspective.
Hold on, we have to go slowly, because you're proposing something very illogical and very paradoxical.
Okay.
So they are actually, for a teacher, the counterpart of a teacher is a pupil, is a student. Now, if the student is a learning student, he is an intelligent student, then he can learn the lesson that the teachers are teaching. And it may be one of the hard lessons, the hard knocks of life.
Right.
Okay. So if the student is ready and his mind is open, his heart is open to learn that, and knowing about your own culpability, then you can say that they are teachers, not in the conventional sense,
right,
of, but they are life's teachers.
Right. They are facilitators in helping me understand life.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to sound, like I said, grandstanding or anything like that.
No.
So, but let's shift a little bit from.
So more important than the teachers. You may perceive them as teachers in hindsight.
Right.
After you've done all the homework, after the burial is over, after the spoils of war, as it were,
right,
are given a completely decent burial. Nothing is left. The ground is empty, and the self is not writhing anymore. The self is at peace. Okay, then you've forgiven everybody. Now I want to ask you. So this whole cycle is over. A cycle arose on the horizon, then giving hope and everything. Then it closed now, and it was a tragic ending, and it left remnants which had to be handled. You handled all that. You're forgiven. You've done your homework. You've done your meditation. Now, will you be shy of dreams and callings from life in the morrow? Or will you be open and innocent enough to receive the next call from life? That's the question for you.
Absolutely open. If I were to go through this exercise, yes.
Okay, good. And but then you are full of hope and less of being tentative. But in the second call which came in the wake of the disaster which happened, will you be more aware and more tentative and more pausing, or will you be reckless and impetuous like when you were answering the first call?
I would be more poised.
You will be more poised,
yes.
Yeah. Not pinning too much on hope, but knowing that life is dicey. Anytime the card can flip, right?
Of course.
Yeah. So that's how it goes on. So dreams, you should always not be afraid of dreams. You should be open to dreams. Dreams will come, is given by the divine if you have to go more deeply into it. That's part of being human. And then if you didn't accept a dream, then I think you're in some sense dead. You have to take the dream. The dream is coming to you. And the dream can come with contradiction, without contradiction. Now, if the dream does not have contradictions and fears and contrary thinkings, then the dream is intense and the calling is intense. You want a dream like that, right?
Yes.
That's part of being human. Yeah. So you should not be broken into 3 or 4 pieces. One piece willing to take the dream, another piece afraid. You should be all in one bundle, one bundle, and a one mind that you're prepared to receive the dream. And it's a dream coming to an innocent person. And it's a dream given by the divine.
Right.
And who knows what is in store. So get into the boat and keep going. That's life.
So I want to slightly rewind. Thanks for that explanation. That was incredible. But during that phase, so after facing the betrayal and didn't know what to do, there was a time when I became very helpless. As like there's nothing I could do to change this. So that is the point where, I shifted my focus inward because there was nothing in the physical world. There's nothing I could change or, do something, take a magic wand and just make it all go away. There's nothing I could have done, right? So that's when I was able to turn inward. Can you throw some light on it? Like, do we have to come to that point?
Yeah, you certainly have to, because nothing else will work. Everything else is a phony solution.
Right.
Is a phony solution concocted by the rascally, dishonest self. Okay, so it's just a trick of the mind. To put it in some other words, it's a trick of the mind. And but did you do that homework of actually seeing yourself culpable, as equally responsible for the disaster and the failure? And did the forgiveness actually happen, leaving you equanimous at the end of it? Did that actually happen to you? And did you do the digesting very consciously? And did the realization come to you that you had a stake in it and you're not a victim entirely? You were a victim at the end of it, yes. But you also created that victimhood for yourself because of your own aspiration and your grandiose ambition and overnight becoming wealthy and that kind of a thing. Correct?
Right.
You did it?
Yes.
You did it. Okay, good. And did you get the state of innocence, which came at the end of the whole cycle of greed and the tragedy which came following that greed and your culpability that you are the victim? Did you get innocence?
Yes.
You got that innocence?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
So that's how that's how life goes. And then again, life will call you elsewhere and you've got to go there. The learning is the important thing.
But between the starting and the ending of this, there was much that went on. It took some time. It didn't happen instantly, obviously. There was also intentions of, I dare I say that, intentions of killing myself instead of, trying to harm my partners, legally in this way and that way.
Yeah.
Somehow trying to take revenge and so on. So it's also the play of the self.
Of course,
yes.
Of course. You see, those are all the projections, projected solutions in the outlook of the self. The self is trying to solve the problem. As I said, as I keep reiterating, the self, because it's pursuing success, will inevitably end up with failures, but it does not know how to deal with those failures. It's the architect of sorrow, but it has no clue how to deal with failures. And you have to die to the whole thing. The self has to die. And you have to be very humble. You have to be ruthlessly honest about yourself and your stakes you had in that. And only then you know that along with them, you also must be crucified. And then when you do the crucifixion of all the bad guys in the drama, in that chapter, then will come fresh sprouting of life again. And so life is not, once that self is extinguished and the dream is over, then life begins again, anew. And that's what life is all about. Just like the geographical seasons. After winter comes spring. So you went through winter and then comes spring. And then the leaves are all fresh and new flowers and so on. Just like that. Whole thing, it works in cycles. And
but why does the self want to hold on to sometimes people harbor revenge and hatred and pain for years and years.
Yeah.
They don't let go and they want to keep it.
Avidya, that is wrong understanding of life. And
That in itself is a killer, so to speak. Like if you're constantly holding it.
Brilliant. It's a killer indeed. Because if that is, let's say that that perception is there, a revengeful thought and a thought of hatred, and is very much part of the human drama. An episode is over and gone, but there is a residue of hatred. There is a violent thought which comes every now and then there is imperfect cognizing of your culpability. It's not perfect cognizing, it's imperfect cognizing. You're not fully gone to the end of it. Not fully died to it, maybe partially died to it. So there is still pending homework. That's what it means. And when you complete that homework, by knowing that you can't blame anyone but yourself for having gone on that adventure which turned out to be a misadventure, then you will be able to forgive. Then the chapter will close without leaving any residue. Then it will happen. But it's a very important part of learning from life. You don't have to go to scripture classes, but this is the work that you've got to do. This is religious work. This is self-knowing. This is the paradigm of the world teacher, Krishnamurti, and everybody has to do this. Now, when you do it, then you receive a blessing. What is that? That is the renewal of life. Life kickstarts again. New life is given to you. Now, if you don't finish the homework and then an invitation to begin a new life comes, now, are you really innocent and joyful to accept that new invitation wholeheartedly, or are you half dead because that previous crisis killed half of you? And you're not innocent because you got hatred and revenge and all of that. And so you can't respond adequately to life unless you finish with the past.
Correct.
So you have to finish it. And life is, the mainstream society must take Krishnamurti's lifetime work more seriously, where it is telling that it's not that you have one self from birth till death. No, you have one self. You must be prepared to let go of that self. It will die at some point because the divine will extinguish it. And then a new self takes birth. Then that has a tenure of 5 or 6 or 10 years. At the end of it, that may have to go into the ashes. And then again, another self is born. And that self may go into the dust after 20 years. So this is what life is. And one has to meditate on that. And one must not get stuck with any one part of the self that we have been.
It's like Phoenix.
Yeah.
Phoenix rising, dying and rising, dying and rising. Yes.
Yeah. So you have to be born again. And in the Vedic tradition, they have a term called Dvija, means twice born. Now the real meaning is this, that you have a near-death experience where one part of that identity is wiped out by life, is wiped out. And then, so then who are you? Then wait. Life will create a new you. That's the new you. And similarly in Christianity, you have the born-again Christians. Now it's not a joke. The term is real. It has significance for somebody to whom this has happened. Dvija and born-again Christians. Dvija means twice born. You can be twice born, you can be 3 times born, you can be 4 times born, depending on your vulnerability to life. Krishnamurti says, die every day. So then, how many times must you die in a lifetime? Hundreds and thousands of times. Die to every insult, die to every disappointment, die to every piece of grief.
Why is this not taught in the mainstream?
This is a new discovery.
Yes.
See, it's like asking, why is Einstein's theory of relativity and quantum mechanics not taught at the high school level, because quantum mechanics and Einstein's theory of relativity is a paradigm shift. Humanity came to know of it only after 1924. A theory of relativity, 1905, general theory of relativity, 1915, quantum mechanics, 1925. So prior to that, only Newtonian mechanics, Newtonian classical physics. Okay, so there's a paradigm shift. So now this is a paradigm shift brought in by the world teacher. So you've got to pay the utmost attention to this new teaching, because it's never come so powerfully like a torrential rainfall. It's come. So you've got to take it seriously and got to work on it in the matrix of your life. You've got a matrix, and in that matrix happens all the calamities, all the debacles, all the failures. There you've got to work it out. Then you know what Krishnamurti is talking about. He's all the time talking about dying. What does it mean? It has to happen. Even if it happens once, deeply, profoundly, we are born again.
I feel that this analogy of dying, I mean, we've heard it in the spiritual circles. But I don't think anybody has actually given an approach, a systematic approach, if I put it that way, a teaching that teaches you step by step on how to get there. Right? Everybody seems to talk about the end goal because it's really grandiose. And
anyway, that's
it's
not
wonderful.
ours, it's Krishnamurti's.
Right.
The Krishnamurti gave it to the world.
Right.
But it's one thing for a great teacher to give something to the world. It's another thing for suffering souls to actually work it out.
Right.
You've got to work it out. For the teaching to come alive in you. It has to come alive in you.
So one ought to work this out, this puzzle.
Of course. It's like a mathematical puzzle. I give you a Rubik's Cube and you have to, shouldn't you work it out?
Of course.
Yeah, that's it. You're given a mathematical puzzle, or you're given some other Buddhist sutra, a Hindu sutra, a Krishnamurtian sutra, and you've got to work it out alone. Now, are you not working out new creations in software architecture day in and day out?
Yes.
You're doing it, right? Why are you not doing it here in the matrix of mainstream life? You've got to work it out there. Systematically, pay attention to it, study it, be with it. Then you can solve it. Now this must become the culture of humanity. And then life will be fresh. Every day will be fresh.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that explanation.
Thank you. Thank you.